And welcome to Mastering the Art of Data Security for BI, Analytics, and Applications. I'm Ashim Berry from KMS, and I'm thrilled to kick off this event, which is all about exploring the latest strategies and tools for protecting your critical data assets. And we are really excited to have with us today our esteemed guest, Omar Masri, CEO of mamori-io. So the goal of today's event is to equip you with practical insights and proven methods to address the unique challenges of data security in BI and analytics. So whether you are dealing with issues like dynamic data masking, row-level security, or secure access controls, we want to provide you with the knowledge to keep your BI environment safe and compliant. With our extensive experience in implementing hundreds of BI projects, we've seen firsthand the importance of robust data security, and I'm sure you would have seen the same, especially in large BI deployments, as some of you already have. And security functionality is provided by the tools like Power BI, Click, and Tableau, amongst others. I'm sure you would agree is generally not adequate enough to cover all the requirements. As we all know, data theft and unauthorized access can have serious repercussions, not just for regulatory compliance, but also for your organization's reputation and customer trust. That's why we understand these challenges and know how to implement effective security measures is crucial. So let me introduce you all to Omar Masri. Omar is an American who has made Melbourne, Australia his home for many years and is the visionary founder of mamori-io. With a rich background spanning 2 decades in the software industry, Omar has held pivotal roles, including his recent tenure as the CTO of Sentient Science and partner at Toba Capital. Additionally, he generously contributes to SecJuice, a distinguished nonprofit publication revered for its independence and volunteer-driven ethos within the information security domain. So you'll learn about the latest trends in data security and discover how to build a robust defense for your BI deployments. Omar, thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure having you here with us. Tell me one thing.
Thanks.
Sure, yeah. So tell me why the title Art of Data Security?
Good question. Thanks for asking that. It's because there's been a big change in cybersecurity in this space in the past 5 years. And for folks to understand why the change has occurred, it requires a change of perspective. And that's what artists do, right? Artists they take content that we know or familiar with and give us a different perspective of it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm first going to that point, I'm first going to talk about what is my perspective? Where do I come from? So my background begins particularly creating productivity tools for the database market back almost 20 years ago with Quest. And since then, from a security perspective, it's been around the compliance. So first as a CTO role with Sentient Science, I've also have a very rich experience. I had a BI practice implementing business objects, for those that remember that, right? And then Tableau and Click deployments here in Melbourne. And then for the security, the cybersecurity aspect of it, so CTO and then CIO at Right Central, which is a SaaS solution for the medical space. And if you notice, what I've been doing in that regard is actually the role of a CIO or a CTO, for those that don't know. Basically, we have to provide attestations. So basically, we have to attest that we've met or we've had a HIPAA risk assessment or an InfoSec audit, and we have to sort of govern all of the testing in terms of do we test our incident response and data breach response and vulnerability and penetration testing, and also we have to write and ensure that all our policies, information policy, classification, privacy, the ones all listed here, ranging from security awareness training all the way down. So that's kind of the perspective I have in terms of cybersecurity. It's the big change has been is we now actually have to be secure, right? So before I continue, I want to give you one thought, which is that I've learned in doing this role across many businesses, right? is that implementing cybersecurity is actually pretty simple, right? Now, how much a business has as a sunk cost into their old approach is what complicates it, right? If you're a startup and you're starting today, it's very easy for me to give you a simple solution, cost-effective solution for you to be compliant with practically everything. But if you're a large player who has 20, 30 years of buying stuff, it becomes more complicated, right? Because you don't want to get rid of the stuff that you have, even though it's not great, right? So think about this sentence as we go on, and you'll see what I mean by this sentence. So implementing cybersecurity best practice is actually pretty simple. Your bias or your sunk costs actually complicates your adoption of that simplicity, right? So today we're talking about a change of perspective. So comparing traditional security for your BI projects or data warehouse projects or application projects, anything to do with reporting versus the modern approach. So traditional approaches are sort of have a lot of manual process in terms of how they onboard people. They do have role-based access, mainly a lot of permanent accounts, right? So for example, I've seen when you're consultants, as you deploy these projects, I would imagine you get given credentials to things. Is that correct? And then your employees then go, your consultants then go and do their work. But those credentials don't have to be requested every day, right? Kind of permanent. Is that correct? For your
Yes, that's
yeah
correct, Omar. I think this is very
yeah
common, and it's like we see this every project which we do, and this is a problem for our clients because so they're kind of exposing some of their critical sensitive data to to the vendor.
correct. Yeah, so you have permanent access. So basically, VPNs, a lot of customers still use VPNs for their consultants. A lot of them require very stringent endpoint protection solutions. They may have a radio server, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas there's a modern approach, which is sort of automating all that on-demand, role-based on-demand access, multi-factor for everything, ZTNA, PAM, DBPAM. I know it's a lot of new terms here, but we can talk about those. Activity monitoring and your threat detection, right? Uh, so how is it different? How are these two approaches different, right? So they're kind of different in terms of their architecture, how it impacts, sorry, how the architecture changes, and also the access control. So we'll look at these two things. The first one is the architecture, right? So the database architecture doesn't change at all, right? You still have your, from beginning to end, you have your sources. I mean, I won't talk too much about this diagram because we're all BI people here, but you have your layers as data is flowing from your raw operational systems or files into your consumption area, your presentation layer. From a cybersecurity perspective, on the right, we have the things that we actually need to protect. These are the assets, right? So the access to the applications, whether they be the Tableau desktops or whether it be Tableau server or the whatever equivalent for Power BI, etc. All the logs that are generated that need to be kind of protected so we can do audits and make sure they're not tampered, etc. Then you have your databases and obviously your database backups. How you protect those from bad actors. So as you go deeper down this list, this is sort of the hackers want this data more and more, right? So they need to get to your backups so they can ransomware you, right? That's what they got to destroy your backups first, and then they can encrypt your data, and then et cetera, right? That's how ransomware works. And then you have they can get to your ingested layer, your servers, and obviously they always try to break into your network, right? So this hasn't changed much. These pieces are still the same, right? So how is it different? So the traditional approach, and you're probably seeing this in your customer sites, right? They operate under a trusted network paradigm, right? So here this is a very basic diagram for simplicity's sake. On the right, you usually have a subnet where all your laptops and people connect when they plug into the office or when they VPN in. They end up in a device subnet where all devices are. And then you have your applications, which are the things they can access. And then you have your servers, your databases, and then where your backups live. So this is kind of a very standard approach of how network, very simplistic, but you've seen this kind of architecture in your customers, Hashim? Kind of this the way they break up their networks.
Yeah, I think this is pretty traditional. I mean, I think a lot of
Yeah.
customers start, I mean, using this approach. Yeah, surely
Yeah.
it's prevalent, yes.
Yes. Yeah, so how do we secure? So typically now, usually you get like a 2FA provider like Okta or Duo, right? Then you go and roll in a bunch of systems. You got to get your firewall, right? Your firewall, modern firewall. Then you get your directory. Then you get your VPN solution. Then you get your PAM solution. Then you get your database activity monitoring solution. Then you get your SIM. Then you get your network threat. Because since you have endpoint devices in here, you have to have something that's sort of checking to make sure the devices aren't doing bad things. Then you have your workflow. Not everyone gets that, but you're out of your endorsement and approval. Then you have your encryption key management and your privacy controls. It's a lot. It's already a lot of systems, right? And then somehow you have to integrate all these together, make sure they all kind of work. And it probably takes you about 2 years. And we're not even done yet, right? Then you have to get your endpoint protection to make sure that since the key thing here and the bad thing about the traditional approach is that the devices are on the network, right? Um, so you have to make sure that they're secure because people watch porn at work or whatever. They look at anime sites, read manga. During lunch break, all those sites are riddled with viruses, right? And then you have your consultants, which means you need an alternative approach of how these consultants are going to come in if you don't want to give them VPN access. So you may need a Citrix server equivalent type thing for the consultants to come in, right? So this is typically what you would find at a large telco or a bank or an insurance company. It's very expensive to roll this out. It's from a people perspective and a software perspective. A mid-tier company may not even have all these pieces. A smaller player, forget about it, right? Now, you would think, Asim, that with all this in place, this would be like close to perfection, right? One would assume you would think, right? But it's not. There's companies with all of this that still get hacked. And why is that? Right? So let's look at that. Let's explore, right? So the first thing is that the 2FA providers, they mainly only 2FA applications, right? Sometimes they do the SSH. They definitely don't do the database connections, right? Uh, the PAM is great for servers, but it's not great for databases. So your credential management, then it becomes just like a vault, like a secret vault. So you don't have PAM-like features for the database access, which is kind of a big gap, right? You have the DAM part, which means you're recording the SQL, but even if you see someone doing something naughty, you can't stop them. It's too late. They've done it, right? Um, your SIM, since it doesn't have all the data, is kind of incomplete because you don't have the PAM for the database equivalent. So your SIM can't see everything. So you're paying a lot of money and you still have gaps. This is why people still kind of get hacked, right? So what's the modern approach? So if you think about it, the way when Google came up with the idea of kind of zero trust many years ago, they said, what we're trying to protect is this. This is what hackers go after, right? Ransomware, for example, is all about this. They screw up your backup so you can't restore, and then they encrypt your data, and then they force you to pay, right? Now, so this is what you're trying to protect. Of these things, where's the risk? These guys, right? They infect devices. So what's the modern solution? Get rid of devices from the network. Done. Right? Simple. What's the best way to avoid your teenage daughter from getting pregnant? Don't have a teenage daughter. I was right when I was working in the US and we did a lot of stuff with the government contracts. I was in an undisclosed classified location talking about classified, assets, and the general wanted to get data from the assets we wanted to do like an analytics project for these assets, and the general was like, no way, because he was like, what's the best way to make sure that the bad guys can't get into a database is don't have one, right? This is like, 15 years ago, no databases, right? So the best way to secure your network is to not have your devices on a network ever. And that's what zero trust, the first part of zero trust is, right? There's no lateral movement between the people doing, going to lunch and watching anime and stuffing stuff up. Anyway, so what is the modern approach? Well, obviously we get devices off. Obviously, there's no master network either. Everything is a separate network, right? Now, you can roll zero trust inside let's say you love your corporate network, you can keep that. And you can do this inside your corporate network, which is what some companies do, right? So it's quite easy to do. But basically, your firewalls are now simpler firewalls. You don't have to have this super expensive, complicated firewall, and your rules aren't shifting as much because they don't have a lot of business rules in them. They're very simple. That makes them very robust and not brittle, right? Then you still implement your things. You have your 2FA, your Active Directory. Now you have ZTNA. You don't have a VPN anymore. VPNs are the most vulnerable things on the planet. They're made like in 1980. You don't want them. Then you have your PAM, your DBPAM, right? Now the DBPAM, I'll talk about that in a bit. You have your SIM, you have an alt threat. So you detect all, you're scanning for threats of everything, your workflow, and then EKM. So what's a ZTNA for those who don't know? ZTNA has these 6 features, right? Device registration. Just going to shrink up my little head here. 2FA and all IP, microsegmentation, TCP for session recording, blocks unauthorized scans, and then there's no default lateral movement. So basically a device connects, it can't see another device, it can't infect another device, they can't share files between each other, if we were all like, if we were on the same VPN network, I could see your laptop, right? And if you probably share your C drive, I could probably get on your laptop without you knowing and take your files, right? It doesn't happen in ZTNA, right? Now, for PAM, that encapsulates a lot of stuff, DBPAM. So you get a single sign-on to all your databases and all your, imagine your Tableau desktops, you would log in with your AD directory to any database. And the same thing for if you were doing, Power BI, et cetera, right? Or if you were a management studio, it'd be the same. You use the same login, you get 2 factors, right? You have your credential management. The microsegmentation is across from database down to the row in the column, right? So the system can have rules to control who can see what depending on your role. You have a SQL firewall, activity monitoring, data privacy, and then you get a choice between web only and clients. It's very simple, right? But it actually deals with all the gaps that the traditional model had, right? So it costs less money, it's faster to implement, and it's more secure, right? And this is kind of where the world is going, right? Now there is an even simpler model. Let's say you're a small business. There's an all-in-one approach. So the big innovation in cybersecurity is, hey, I don't really care about cybersecurity that much. I just want to be secure. I don't know anything about it. What do I have to install? It's almost like, the Apple Play box or the Google, the Alexa box, right? Just give me the thing. I just plug it in and it works, right? You still have your firewalls and you get a memory server. You're done. That encapsulates everything in the prior slide, right? Now, Mamori is the only one in the market that has everything. There are other products probably out there that are starting to consolidate things. Now, what if you say, hey, but I love my Active Directory and my Duo and my, Azure. Fine, you can integrate. And then what if you say, hey, but I love my PAM. I love CyberArk. I don't want to get rid of, fine, that's fine. You can use your existing PAM, right? And even for, hey, I love my VPN. You can still use your VPN if you want to, right? So the goal is to actually help you actually be secure, simplify it, and make yourself kind of more productive, right? Now, the next bit where the things differ is actually access, right? So these are the people that actually cause problems. Like if it was just infrastructure, it's like happy, right? So for example, this person here, they're like a gambling addict, right? They're always going to gambling websites during work. This person here, right? He could be watching, manga, so his machine's infected with all this stuff. So you just don't know what what devices have, right? But that's why here I just have a bunch of little viruses because I assume that all these users, all their devices are infected. So they've already been hacked. All their passwords have been stolen, right? When I operate a business, I assume that every single one of my staff has been hacked already, right? So how do I secure the system, right? So that's an interesting way to start off, right? So from a BI perspective, these are the consumers that we have, right? From a reporting perspective, you have your just the people who consume from like the Tableau server or the Click server or the Power BI server, right? Then you have your DevOps people, right? Whether they work for corporate IT or they work for the business, their internal staff, they're doing the data pruning and cleansing, the ETL work, managing the database, right? And sometimes they work from home. So you have the thing, and then you have your consultants, right? Who do, for example, assume your staff, you would be in here, right? This is you're the DevOps consultants, you implement the whole project, right?
Yes.
Then you have, yeah, that's right. And then you have the service accounts, right? So I would imagine for your customers, you set up monitoring tools, you set up the Click server login. The Click server has to connect, so all those logins of when it goes and gets data, right? Your developers, they know all those logins, right? You would, right? So you're kind of babysitting all those credentials. So
That's right.
this is yeah. So hackers love to steal this stuff right here, the service accounts, because there's no two-factor, right? And sometimes I don't know if you ever made these where you help a business build an application, and then you help build the reporting modules for their customers. So now customers are coming in to report off the data that the business or the SaaS product is storing for them. So it's a very common thing, right? So customer client reporting. So how is it different? So in the traditional approach, right? So the process of providing access that hasn't changed, right? So you create an account, you provision the access, you check that the access is still valid at some point, you terminate or update the access based on the change, and then the account terminates, right? So traditionally, some admin has to go and create the identity in AD or Azure or whatever the directory is. Then someone has to go and set up the database access, the SSH access, the RDP access. They got to go and set them up in all their respective systems, set up their VPN access, give them their laptop if the company has a special, dedicated laptop. Then every so often, the admin has to go in and extract all the access rules and then generate a report, see if that access is still valid with the managers, right? And then say, okay, what do I do? Who do we get rid of, right? So it's this whole manual process. Then the managers respond, and then they go and alter the access, and then at some point, someone finds out. Now, oddly enough, even though this process is very manual, is very vulnerable. So a lot of data theft happens because of this, right? Because let's say you're an employee, your AD account is terminated at some date, but your database access hasn't been terminated yet. You can go and steal as much data as you want on your last day, and then you walk out with the data, right? So you could be ISO 27001 compliant with this abysmal process. Personally, if I was the auditor, I would fail you, right? Because to me, this is a vulnerable process, right? The modern approach is you start off the same, you create the identity, and then the identity, the user actually just requests, hey, I want access to the system. The manager, the business owner of that system approves it, not the admin, right? And then there's a processor gets approved, and then he does his work, right? Then everything else is automated, right? The access terminates when the policy says so, etc. Right? Now the next thing is actually the access method of how you get access. So traditionally, you know, you usually have a bit of software that checks to make sure, like a VPN, a very modern VPN will make sure that your endpoint is, has endpoint protection. A lot of them have that extra feature now, right? Then you're going to log into your VPN, or you're going to plug in your machine to the network. Your device is going to get added to the network, and some networks have intrusion detection, right? Let's assume you do. And you're in the network, right? So for me, the big problem is this right here. In all of the companies that I kind of do this work for, I allow no devices absolutely for no reason to ever be added to any network, right? So now for remote, there's a couple choices, right? Some people do the Citrix server type solution. Some people just never allow it, which kind of, impedes business initiatives, right? And some people do the crazy. I love this one, right? You have a guy who makes 120 grand a year or 200 grand a year, sit there, have a Zoom meeting, and just let some guy control his machine. So you got two guys, you're paying two guys, $2,000 a day, just to sit there and just so he can go and look at it and do something on a server. I love that one, right? That's funny. All right, so what's the modern alternative, right? The modern alternative is to give you you should have two choices. One is for people who do need IP access, right? It's this. And look at all the beautiful layers and policy security injections you can do, right? And that's what you want. This is what it should look like. Your device is registered, only one device, only one key per device per IP, right? If two IPs with the same key, then they get blocked, right? So someone steals your key, right? And you get all these beautiful layers of policies injected. Whoops, no, clicked on the pasteboard. Or for people that you don't want to give IP access to, you have web-only access. You send them a URL, and they can get to all the same resources, but just via portal, web-only access. And then you get the same beautiful security features and policies in either approach. So this is the way, kind of the simplest way to do it, right? So the IT administrator can decide, or the guy making the policy, who needs what, right? So you can segment. Right? All right.
Yeah, perfect. Or yeah, that answers the question. So now, from what you have just shared with us, I mean, my next question would be, what are the top three things that we can easily do today? And this is the question I think, most of the attendees would have in their mind.
Yeah, no. So we have a lot of stuff that I just spoke for like 5 minutes straight, right? So so if you can only do one thing or a couple of things, the first one is to solve the real problem of having devices on your network, right? So eliminate or reduce your direct IP access to resources. So get rid of your traditional VPN, at least for a part of your population. Start off with your consultants, get them through an alternative approach that's kind of more modern. And eventually you want to get to the point where you have an internal ZTNA inside your corporate network, et cetera, right? So this is the first step. If you could only do one thing, this is kind of the first thing. The next thing is, it sounds kind of simple, which is 2FA everything, right? So here you see all the lists, and everything means everything. I always have this little picture here of, remember the Dilbert boss, because when I speak to people, right? So for example, people say, oh, I have 2FA, and you ask them, okay, great. What are you 2FA? And they'll say, oh, we got 2FA, we 2FA our applications. I go, okay, you've got one of your things. What about your SSH access and your RDP access and your database access and your file share access? And they usually go up, right? So everything means everything, right? And lastly is, don't ever hand out a server key or database credential to anyone ever, ever, ever again, right? So when someone wants to log into a database, they should use their identity, right? Then you don't hand out passwords or credentials to anyone under any circumstance, right? So to do this, you have to implement the PAM and the DBPAM, right? Simple as that, right?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, that's perfect now. So how does one get started, Omar?
Yep. Now to get started, right? So there's 5 easy steps that you can do, right? So, and they kind of go in line with everything we kind of discussed. And one is, you do the steps to limit your access to the network, right? Then you implement your on-demand workflow. This is how people are going to access your data marts and your databases and all the areas to be able to do this ETL work, etc. Then you implement your PAM and your DBPAM for that access. And then you implement your data privacy controls, your masking. And then obviously you layer in your threat detection. And the modern threat detection should just be anything trying to go against your policies, right? So, so what do I mean by on-demand workflow? And this is I'll sort of show you what kind of looks like. So, an individual should be able to request a resource, request a policy. The manager should be able to approve or deny the request. Then the user can execute that approved request at some moment in time in the future, and then the access should just kind of expire. So in Mamori, what does that kind of look like? So let me just sort of break out of here. Nope, we'll discard here. I'm just going to log in here to, so a Mamori server can be deployed anywhere. You can deploy this locally inside your infrastructure. I'm just going to log in, and I'm also going to share. Give me a second to share my phone. Phone.
So while you are doing that, I just kind of let all the attendees know that they can use the chat box to ask any questions, as well as there's a raise hand button below, so you can use that to if you want to basically talk to us or verbally raise a question with us.
There we go. My phone's in. All right, so this is just a Mamori app, but you could use it could be Okta or Duo, whatever other 2FA you have. But we have a free one that's baked in for people who don't want to pay extra for two-factor, right? So I'll be using the demo at Masri, which is my AD account. And I'm just going to log in to the portal here. Log in. It's kind of, similar like all 2FAs. You get a push notification, and then you're in. So this is what a user sees. And if you notice here, he's got access to different types of resource, and he can just request the access. He doesn't have, so you can control which resources they can see, which resources, based on their role, what can they request. So you can request by resource type. You can also come here and have a look at the types of resources you can request, databases, secrets, and roles, or you can request a policy. So you can create custom policies that, for example, application 1, which is these databases, these servers, these Windows servers, this data policy, etc. Right? So I'll just request this for, we'll do it 60 minutes. So here we'll do a request. And now the admin, so I'm going to log in here. I'll do another log in here as a different user. All right, so now the admin can see more stuff, but you can come in here, or the manager, and you can come in here and you can see the request and then endorse it. Right. All right, so when an endorse happens, the user gets notified, hey, someone's approved your request. He can view it and approve it here, or execute it here, or you can, in the browser, when I can see my requests, I can see that it's been approved by this administrator. And so I can execute this at any time. And then once I execute it, I'll be able to access my resources. So extremely simple to configure. And you can do this for any bit of actual infrastructure. So that's kind of the endorsement and approval workflow, right? Now, I guess kind of the next thing in there is, how do you limit access to the network, right? So let's say you have a population of users. The first question is, do they need traditional VPN access? Do you even have one? If you don't have one, then it's a no. But if yes, then you give those people just VPN access. If they don't really need it, then you ask the next question: do you want to give them access to thick clients like Toad or Power BI desktop or tablet desktop. They actually have to connect with a thick client, right? Or do something special, right? Or a special, like, thick client. If you say yes, then you give them ZTNA access, right? If they don't really need it, if they just have to SSH onto a jump box or RDP into a jump box, or maybe just run some SQL on a table, but they don't have to do it via a particular client, then you can give them web-only access. So this allows you to control the risk of your user, right? So web-only access is the simplest to deploy, but it's also the lowest risk, right? And I'll show you what that looks like, right? So if I come back in here, so this user here that I've just requested, right? Oops, let me see, requests. All right, yeah, so I've already executed that policy. So here is my SSH login. So I can come in here and just click in here and it pings my phone, right? So click. So I'm going to get two-factored on every access, and now I'm here on the server. If I want to do an RDP, same thing. I can just click, and it sends me a 2FA, right? Sends me 2FA, and I'm in, right? And I'm on the machine. It's going to start Management Studio. Don't know why. All right, but that's basically RDP, right? Now all of these systems actually come with file transfer becomes a permission. So for example, there's a key. I can upload a file, download a file if I have the permission. The same goes with didn't want to log in. The same goes with the Windows. You have your clipboard, and then you get your file sharing. There's a drive on the machine that you just put files in, you can download. You can also have, if you have internal websites, you can also get access to those internal websites, right? You also have your secrets, passwords for all this stuff. And obviously then you have your SQL. So I could come in here and run Mongo SQL if I wanted to. Mongo, bang. And I get my data privacy controls kicking in. I can run Oracle SQL if I want to. Any database that's supported, which are mainly all the big ones, right? Again, it's so it's very easy from a DevOps perspective. So actually, if you think about most developers or DevOps people, they just need to pop into a system, run a bit of SQL, and pop out, right? This portal here makes them extremely productive because they can launch their SSH, their remote desktops, and they can jump in and out of databases all from one little console. They don't have to have typically, your 20 tools, all these different tools opening at the bottom, right? A new developer doesn't have to install anything. So that's what I'm saying. And it's your lowest risk from a security, but also the most productive. The next level up is the CTNA, right? So what they would do is this client right here, right? So I would just activate the network, right? And then I can just say, use my native clients, right? So I can come here, remote desktop, connect, right? I get two-factor, click, right? And so now I'm accessing just the IP via the ZTNA solution. So there's my RDP, right? If I have like a Windows file share, for example, I'm gonna close all this, right? So we're able to two-factor any type of, see, there's a file share. I'm gonna go accept, right? And then that file share should come up. Now I can look at the file share. So you can 2FA practically anything. So this is kind of your CTNA solution. We can also do internal websites. So if I click on new here, for example, let's say you have a community version of an ELK server. So I would imagine your deployment session, you guys deploy a lot of free, like, open source software, like GitLab, Gitea, ELK servers, Grafana. So all these services, the free ones, don't come with multi-factor. You have to pay for those. But if you have a solution like this, you can get two-factor to your ELK, right? With no weird integration, no SAML, no OAuth. It's just the fact that you're going to the IP. It's pretty cool, right? All right, so that's kind of we secure your ZTNA access So your low risk, your medium risk, and then obviously your VPN access is your kind of your highest risk, right? So you could see, I guess, the same if your consultants kind of had a portal like this for their work, when you hire a new consultant, you give him the right role, and that's it. That's the handover. That's his onboarding, right? Here's all the access, here's all the servers, here's the databases. He can start doing his work in really quick, as opposed to before you had to have some sort of, a wiki with everything, or some spreadsheet or some document or something that tells him where everything is, right? So it's all pretty good. All right. Now for the PAM, right? So we kind of saw the web access to the SSH, and the web access to RDP and the secret vault. So I'm just going to show you really quick the sessions, right? Because really PAM is about protecting the credential, but then also giving you the connection logs, right? So if I come in here to the connection logs, you can go SSH. You can see we have an active session there. Look at the session, and you can come and just play your session that we just did, right? And the same goes for your remote desktops. So the beauty about this connection log, if you notice, it's in one spot. It's got your API, your mobile API, your web access, your remote desktop access, your SSH access, all your ZTNA connections, and then your database proxy connections, right? So any SQL that we run, so you have everything in one spot already aggregated and recorded, right? Now the next bit on the slide is kind of the DB-PAM, right? So the DB-PAM, so we have the web access to the demo, the native tool access to the the web access to the databases, and then with the native tool access. So let's have a look at the data masking and unmasking and kind of how that works, and also the permission delegation and all the policies that you can do. So out of the box, Mamori comes with a set of masking functions for a series of, all the key databases, or database protocols, etc. Right? For things like Mongo, that's your JavaScript. Now these functions, you can add new functions, you can edit the existing functions, and then you come in here and you just apply them to the for NoSQL, you apply the endpoints or the paths that you want to intercept, right? For SQL, right, you kind of specify, this database, this schema, this table, this column, this operation, which how you want to mask it. So it's very, very easy for you to create a policy. So for example, the default policy is one that applies to everyone, right? No matter what their role is. So it's basically you don't have to do any special permissions. These masking rules will apply to everyone in the solution that's accessing data. So to add a function, you just pick your database in your column, and then you pick the function that you want to apply. There's also encryption. If you want to do encryption, you can get encryption functions in here as well. From asymmetric to symmetric encryption, et cetera, et cetera. So a very robust masking and encryption engine, right? And then for the permissions, again, it's very, very robust. So in Mamori, you can define roles, right? And in these roles, you get given a set of permissions across the privileges, the keys that you can access, which secrets you can access, what credentials you can access, which permissions, which database policies, and road limit alerts, and servers and IPs. But for database in particular, you can come in here and specify the type of grant that you want. You can grant or deny. So you can say, deny from this data source, from this database object, anything that's like this, right? So the user will have access to everything else, or you could just do a grant, right? So you can pick and choose the permission that you want to grant. So for example, the user currently only has select, right? Which means if I come back over here and try to do, if I come over here and try to run a delete, right? Operation not allowed, right? Because I only have select, even though the credential that this connection is using is actually a DBA credential. But because in Mamori you've specified that he only has select, it gets blocked, right? So this is all I can do. So if I wanted him to have, delete, I would have to do this and then do the grant, right? Yeah, so basically you could do, I forgot to show you. When you do select, for example, you get your row restrictions. You can apply row limits. So let's say you want to select on a particular table to, you don't want more than 10,000 rows to be selected. Now you can create an alert that says if someone tries to slowly break that barrier from this table, then we will alert you. So this is for slow data steal. So hackers don't select a billion rows at the same time, right? They steal 1,000, and they do it over the span of months or a year, right? So we can detect the slow data theft, for example. It's one of the threat detections that we have. You can also apply a where clause, right? So if you want to, for certain sort of tables, whenever this person with this role selects, apply this extra condition, right? So if you have two sales guys doing analysis and one's East Coast sales, one's West Coast sales, then the East Coast will only ever see East Coast data, right? Simple as that. All right, and then for the for the policies, I forgot to mention the policies. So on top of all the robust masking and robust permission delegation, we have policies, right? So you can say, for example, hey, this credential, so we have before connection policies and after connection policies, right? So before the connection, we don't know who the role of the user is, right? But we do know the user that you're trying to use, the target that you're trying to get to, and the protocol you're trying to use, SSH, RDP, database, Oracle, whatever. We know the time of day. So it's all this information. And you could, for example, you could say, don't allow people, unless they have the role allowed after hours, only allow them in during working hours. Very easy to make the policy, right? Or unless they have this particular role in Active Directory, just block them, right? So you can create all these rules about how people can connect. And you can also make rules about SQL. So for example, deny anything with a select star, deny anything on this table without a where clause, deny anything that has multiple statements trying to come in at the same time, deny a user if he's got two sessions from different IPs. Whatever rules your CISO wants, we can do, right? Very open-ended, right? You can, and then you can then have also very complex rules like find me or revoke. If you want, for example, you don't want to allow um, um, people to have permanent access to your production database, for example, ever. You can go and scan to make sure that no one has ever granted. The moment someone tries to grant themselves that, it'll sort of revoke their permission immediately, right? So you have all these kind of event-driven policies that you can also write, right? So it's a very robust system that can handle the most complex types of policies that you need to implement. And then last but not least is an example of threat detection. So I think for this one, what I'll do is, here's a ransomware. This is here's a hacker basically doing a scan of the network looking for Oracle databases, right? So what's going to happen is because it's coming, so this device has been hacked. So we know the user, so we're going to 2FA him. So he's going to be like, imagine you're getting all these 2FA notifications, right? that you don't know about. Also, the administrators will be notified because we've detected this is an unauthorized scan. So we can send a message to email or Slack, whatever you want, whatever notification system you want to integrate with. We have a record of all the log of all the activity that's actually happened, right? In the TCP log. And that peer is actually blocked. So we've just basically we've removed that peer from being able to send any more requests, right? So everything's blocked from his system. All right, well, I guess that's kind of near almost the time that we have for the webinar. I hope this kind of shows you a different perspective, provides you a different perspective of how you can actually secure your your data networks or your data solutions, I mean, right? And the big thing for me is 20 years ago, I used to buy solutions to be compliant, right? The boss would say, hey, we got a customer that's requiring this, this compliance, or to get this military contract, we got to meet this requirement, that we have this thing. So we would go buy features, right? We didn't really care that much about kind of being secure. That wasn't the focus. The focus was on meeting compliance. That's completely changed, right? Now the focus is actually on actually being secure. And the reason is because you can't get insurance if you're not, right? So it's as simple as that. The compelling event is no insurance company is going to give you insurance, or they're going to charge you a lot of money. If you're making a lot of revenue and you don't have these controls, your premiums are going to be skyrocket. If you deal with any PII or HIPAA or PDPA, anything to do with data, you're going to get hammered, right? So the big switch, my final thought is to leave you with this thought, is that compliance is actually should be a consequence of actually being secure, right? From cyber threats and data theft, right? If you just focus on actually really being secure and having a modern approach that's simple and has no gaps, then it's very easy to become compliant. Because it's very easy to be compliant and still get hacked. Definitely. I could be, for example, there's so many companies in Australia that are SOC 2 compliant and ISO compliant, and they still get hacked, right? Medicare, for example, Optus, for example, they have audits every year, and they still get hacked. So compliance does not equal to security. So hopefully, with the things I've outlined in this sort of presentation, kind of gives you a different perspective on how you can actually secure your projects. Thank you.
Definitely, Omar. I mean, this is really useful, and I think when we are talking to our clients, some of whom are already on this call today, I think this will be very, very useful in addressing some of their security related questions and issues which they are facing. So yeah, I think this was very useful. So what I'll do is I'll touch then open it to anybody who's on the call. I mean, whether they have any questions or not. And I will see if if they type anything in the chat box, or if they're raising a hand, then we can take that up.
Sure.
Yeah. So any questions from anybody, any of the attendees, let us know. Or of course, you can always reach me on my email, and I'd be happy to, if required, get on another call with Omar to address any of those. So I think there's no questions coming up, Omar. So I think we can close this session. And yeah, I mean, as and when somebody reaches out, then we can have another call with them. So thank you so much for today's session. I think it was very, very useful, and we look forward to talking to you again.
All right. Bye, everyone. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. And thank you for joining us in today's session.